Marketer of the Day, Episode 653, The Exponential Networking Strategy. Use podcast interviews to interview clients, influencers, and prospects with unstoppable CEO Steve Gordon.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We're chatting with best-selling author Steve Gordon, and Steve is known as the unstoppable CEO. And if you're a service business owner or you're a solopreneur and you want to zero in on your ideal clients and you want to build systems to consistently attract clients, then Steve is your guy to talk to, and we're going to hear all about that and so much more. So Steve, how are things today?
They're awesome. Robert, great to be here.
Awesome. Glad to have you. And so, what would you say is the thing that makes you unique, or what would you say is maybe your focus of the last 6 to 12 months?
I think the thing that makes us unique, just in general, is we take a really long view to building a business. So many of the tactics that are talked about in marketing are focused on a really short-term view of building a business. And my first business, we had clients that were with us for 25 years. And that was the most profitable set of relationships that you could even imagine. And so we really focus on how do you go and attract that kind of client and then hang on to them over a long period of time. And so over the last year, we've been focused on, from a marketing perspective, with our clients and for ourselves as well, we've been focused on using the medium of podcasting to be able to create those relationships, create that trust, and really tee up those long-term relationships.
Fantastic. And so I already have so many questions. So the first thing is, so you say that you're building these long-term relationships, some of these clients that have been with you for 25 years plus. And was the process of getting those clients as long of a time commitment as keeping them? Did it take a long time to build up that trust, or was it you got them quick, now you have them?
Well, so if we go back to that business, in most cases, it took a while to build up those relationships. Some of those relationships started in the 80s. And so, when you look at the way that you were forced to build relationships back then, a lot of it was one-on-one and manual. And one of the ways that we found that you can accelerate that now is with audio as a medium. You're doing a podcast every day. You've done, how many episodes are you on now? It's in the hundreds, right?
650 or so, yeah.
So that's the opportunity for you to show up if every episode's about 30 minutes for roughly 300 hours in the life of a prospect. Now, maybe your prospects aren't going to sit and listen to you for 300 hours, but we will routinely get on sales calls now with potential clients, and they'll say things like, yeah, I was on a car trip and I binge listened to your podcast, and I just realized that, you're my guy. And you ask them some questions and you realize they've listened to 20 episodes. They spent 10 hours with me, building trust, listening to me tell a story, listening to me have an interview like this with somebody. And little by little, I'm advancing that trust, and I'm able to do it in an accelerated way and in a leveraged way. So what we did, 30 years ago, or really 35 years ago, when we started those 25-year relationships in that first business, now we're able to do it at scale and with a lot of leverage that we didn't have before.
Right. Because before, when you were trying to scale, you'd have to copy the cassette tapes, right? You'd have to print out the manuals. So there was no way to just for free digitally copy all the podcast episodes or the blog post articles, those sorts of things, where guys like you and me maybe have a little bit of that recurring discipline to crank out one more podcast episode, one more article, and we're just doing the work in little bits and pieces. But then that pays off when someone has that whole library right there to access. And so things are a lot better. We don't have to walk uphill in the snow both ways anymore, so to speak. And so when you are looking at it and saying, okay, well, that ideal client, they might find my library of podcast episodes. What's your strategy there going in? Do you just say, I'm going to commit to doing X number of episodes, or how do you get from having nothing to having all kinds of helpful stuff that they can find about you?
Well, I've tried implementing this in all sorts of ways with our clients over the last 10 years. So, for the last 10 years, I've worked with professional service firms to help them create these relationships through marketing. And we've tried articles, we've tried, drip emails, we've tried all kinds of things, and all of those are great and they work very well. One of the secrets I tell folks on our webinars is that you name a marketing strategy and it works, and I'll find an example showing you it works. The question is which one are you going to be able to look at and say, yeah, I can do that over a long period of time. One of the reasons that we're so big on podcasts is that for the average business owner, all you've got to do is show up and talk, and you already know how to do that. You're already having interesting conversations with people at lunch and over coffee. And so this is not a new skill you have to develop. So if you're going to write articles and you're not a natural writer, you've got to develop the skill of writing, and it takes a lot of time to do that. And so one of the reasons we really like this as a medium is I think it's very accessible for people. The other thing I like about it is it creates, because they're hearing your voice, it creates trust a lot more quickly than if somebody reads an article. So coming back to your question, how do you get there? Well, I think you commit to doing this for a period of time. And I don't mean 6 months. I'm thinking, you want to commit to creating a presence in your market for 5 years or 10 years going in. Now, you could do it with a podcast, you could do it with an email newsletter, you could do it with an offline newsletter, you could do it lots of different ways. Pick one way and commit to it for years. And you're not going to necessarily see it magically transform your business in the first 3 months or even maybe the first 6 months. But over time, you're going to see that you've created this asset, and all of a sudden, the weight of it, because you've been consistent over that period of time, is overwhelming. I was just at breakfast this morning with one of my clients. He's been a client for 10 years. And he started a podcast now 3 years ago. He's a financial advisor. He puts on seminars, sells the most difficult product in the world to sell, life insurance, because nobody wants to buy it. They have to talk about dying to get it. And the benefit happens after you're dead. So nobody wants this. Well, seminars are pretty standard in that industry. And most people have to promise a big fancy steak dinner to get anybody to show up to one of those. Well, my client John doesn't do that. You're lucky if you get a glass of sweet tea and some cookies in the back of the room. And yet, for the last 3 months, he's put 100 people each month into a seminar. Room was filled to capacity. They were turning people away. I don't know anybody else in the industry that's able to do that. And the big difference for him, because he's pretty good at marketing otherwise, the big difference for him has been how he's used this podcast over the last 3 years. He asked for a show of hands around the room. Who listened to the podcast? Over half of the hands went up. And in this podcast, he's interviewing his clients, talking about what great retirement they have, how they're doing trips, how they're doing these activities that they put off all during their working lives, and using that as a way to connect him and his business to these fantastic outcomes. And so, and the people who are listening to it are able to hear that real life story. And so I think that's how you get there. You commit to doing that, and you make it easy on yourself. You do it in a way that fits with how you like to work.
Awesome. And that's great advice, because if you try to gravitate towards writing and you're not a writer, you try to gravitate towards YouTube and you're not great at making videos, and you're just trying to make it work and you're toughing it out. I mean, that's not going to last for years, right? So it's better to go where it's easy, go in that format where you have fun. And if writing is better or podcasting is better, why fight it? And one thing that I found really interesting about that story there about John, the life insurance financial advisor, is that his podcast wasn't just him recording an episode, just him. He was interviewing these clients. So do you give any thought into how much of the content to make yourself just a solo episode versus bringing in interviewees, things like that?
Yeah, we have kind of a 3-pronged strategy for creating the content around something like a podcast. So the first part of that is to go and interview your clients and interview them about the success that they've had from working with you. Now, John's a little bit unique. He's in financial services, and because of the regulations in that industry, he can't get testimonials. He can't do case studies on someone's investment performance. But he can sit down and have a conversation with them about the trips they're taking, or the new hobbies or activities that they're enjoying in retirement, which is the real result everybody wants from the work he does anyway. And so he's been able to do that. But for virtually every other business, you can go direct to the specific result that you created for the client. So that's the first piece of it. The second piece is to go and interview either influencers in your industry who would be really great referral partners, and use it as a way to give them some value up front. In other words, you go find a complementary business, you have an interview, much like what we're doing now, and you're going to share this interview with your audience. And I'm going to turn around and I'm going to share it with everyone in my audience, and I'm going to refer them to you. You're going to refer people to me without us really doing any extra work other than having this interesting conversation today. And so you're going to create an immediate relationship and an immediate bi-directional referral opportunity, and an easy one. And so you want to use that as a way to then deepen those relationships. A lot of times what we'll find, in fact, we just started a client at the beginning of the month, and just in the first 7 interviews that he's booked, he hadn't even done the interviews yet, but just in the 7 interviews he's booked with influencers, he's created 3 opportunities to do presentations, to do webinars where he can present his solution, all about what he does. It's essentially a sales presentation to those audiences. And so it's instantly allowed him to create these, what we call massive referral opportunities. The other group that you want to interview are prospects, potential clients that would be difficult for you to get through the gatekeeper to talk to, particularly if you're selling business to business, because every business owner out there wants to promote their business. And so if you're selling to another entrepreneurial company, and you give that business owner the opportunity to come on a podcast and promote themselves, and you're going to share it with everybody they're going to answer that call. And now you've built a relationship that's not based on, hey, I'm here to sell you something. You've built a relationship on, hey, can I give you some value? Let's become friends. The next time you go back then to engage that person in conversation, they're going to answer the phone, because you've already got rapport, you've got relationships. So it's a much easier way in. So that's those 2 groups really form the second piece of this 3-pronged system. So we started off with interviewing your clients. Then we talked about interviewing influencers and prospects. And then the third type of content you want to put in a podcast are solo episodes. And this is where you're coming on and you're sharing your worldview. Like, this is how we do things here and why we do them this way, and why we think this is the way that you should be thinking about this particular problem and this particular set of solutions. And so you want to mix those 3. And often in the beginning, when we're working with clients, they tend to do more on the interview side, because 1, it helps them collect case studies, and most businesses don't do a very good job of collecting case studies. So when they interview their clients, they get these great case studies. 2, they usually need leads. So by going out and interviewing prospects and influencers, they can begin generating leads. And then very quickly they realize, oh, wait, I've got all these ideas about how people should be solving this particular problem that we work on. I need to get that out there too. And so usually there's this progression over the first 3 to 6 months where it's pretty heavy with clients, and then it moves sort of influencers and prospects, and then they get into the solo episodes, and then it becomes kind of a balance of all 3.
That's amazing. And I can completely see that happening, where they figure things out. They figure out which type of those types of episodes they like. And then after doing all the different areas, and then they kind of figure out the balance, and they figure, okay, well, I'll do a few of the solo episodes, or I'll interview this client, or I'll go after some of these influencers or these prospects. And what I like, well, there's 2 things that I like a lot about what you just said there. And one is that, I don't know, like I feel like years ago, if I had heard that whole list, I would have thought, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. I need to do 20 of each type. But then when I hear it now, I'm thinking, when you list those 3 or 4 possibilities if you include the solo episodes. It's like there's tons of options, right? It's like if I just picked and choose a couple of this type, a couple of that type, you can have a very varied podcast. And then that leads me to like point number 2 here, which is that, well, it's easy to get burned out, right? Or it's easy to get afraid of putting your voice out there, or afraid of doing the podcasting. And it seems like, from what I've seen, is people get hung up on the details and the technology and am I doing this right? But when they focus on the people, if they're interviewing their best case studies, success stories, if they're interviewing those influencers, if they're interviewing those prospects, then it doesn't matter if you as the host, if you're a little rough around the edges or not the best interviewer. It doesn't really matter so much if you don't have the best equipment or you don't know what you're doing, because the focus is on that person that you're interviewing, right? It's like you don't even have to talk as much as that guest. You don't have to have it all figured out. And I would imagine that your clients that jump in on this and begin recording their podcast, maybe they were a little nervous at first, but then once they interview just a couple of people, it's like that enthusiasm wears off, don't you think?
Yeah, they quickly get comfortable with it. Everybody's nervous at first. I'm sure you were nervous the first episode you did. Our podcast is weekly, and we're now at almost 150 episodes. And I was really nervous the first few I did. And you get better over time. I think you have to allow yourself the space to say, I'm going to do this at first, and I'm going to be way better 6 months in than I am today at the beginning. And I'm going to be even better a year in or 2 years in than I was at 6 months in. And that's okay. But at the end of the day, you're just having a conversation. I mean, you and I connected on Skype. We talked for all of about 30 seconds before we got started. And here we are having a great, fun conversation about this topic that people are going to listen to. It's not that hard. The hard part is actually the technical stuff on the back end. And that's really, what we do for our clients. We take care of all of that, so they don't have to worry about it. All they do is show up and talk and focus on that relationship, because, I'm in a mastermind group with 40 other internet marketers, and some of them sell courses, some of them sell big time events. I mean, these are names that you would know around the internet, and every one of them will tell you that yes, that while they do Facebook ads and they do email marketing and all this other stuff, the place where they get most of their profit is from the relationships that they've developed that then send them business. Whether that's through affiliate marketing, which is really just referrals on a big internet. It's a fancy internet term for a referral. That's really all that it is. Okay. Or it's, literally direct referrals like most businesses think of. But everyone in that group will tell you that that's their best source of business. And this is a way to create relationships that will support that, whether you're a big business on that scale or you're a little local business. So we've done this with local consulting businesses, in IT consulting and the financial advisor, like John, like we talked about. And so it works on all of those scales. And that's one of the things that I think is so neat about it.
I agree. And what you're making me think of is, you said that in the 80s, things wouldn't scale like this. And even in the mid 2000s, I would go to events and I would get someone's business card and hand them my business card, but then realize, well, I'm not the best follow-up type of person. I'm not one of those slick people that can say, oh, let's work out a deal. I'll mail to your affiliate program and vice versa. I wasn't great at that. But what I did back then was, this was before podcasting, I'd say, let's hop on an interview and I'll ask you some questions and you can appear really smart. And then I'll send my list to that interview and then we'll both have that mutually beneficial relationship. But what really sucked about that was there was no podcast to put it on. So we'd record some interview, put it on a web page, and then in 6 months or a couple of years, I wouldn't even know where that old web page is. But nowadays with, Facebook and Google and things are indexed and they sit in the podcast app or the smartphone for years. Now that stuff is more permanent. But I think you're so right that that getting those deals, those connections, that endorsed traffic, that's way better than trying to play around with ads that might work today and then are gone tomorrow, or playing around with some SEO ranking, which is great to have, but who knows if the rules are changed on you again. This is one of those things where this strategy has always worked going back centuries, but the delivery was always inefficient. It was always temporary. But now that we have a podcast and we can, like you said, connect on Skype and do it from your home, do it from anywhere, and then knock it out, hit a button, or have the worker process it, there's no excuse anymore, right? It's super duper easy to do it, and we all need to be doing it. And it's great that it works in any industry. If you're a internet marketer and you're all dialed in with all the fancy traffic methods and websites, well, you still need to have those personal connections, because if other internet marketers have that and you don't, then you're going to miss out. And then if you're a service business or IT consultant or anything like that, or doing business locally, this all still applies, because you can still interview those best clients, interview those influencers, interview those prospects, do those solo episodes, and then just get it done and call it a day, and improve every few months and look back at what you did a few months ago and cringe. But then back then you look at what you did months before and cringe again, and keep getting better over time. And so you said that it's really important for people to use you and your team and your services. That way the technical stuff is taken care of, because I'm sure that holds a lot of people back from getting a podcast out there. As we're beginning to wrap up here, other than the technical stuff, can you think of any reason why people wouldn't go for this, or why people would hesitate on this whole podcast thing, and how we can just get them energized and get them to do it anyway?
Well, so a couple of things on that. First, I think podcasting is a great technology, a great medium for this. Ultimately, though, and you said, I think you said it the right way. This is a strategy that's about relationships, and relationships are the fundamental building block of business. And so this is a strategy that over time, while the technology has changed, maybe 10 years ago, 10 years from now, we're not going to call it a podcast. It'll be some other thing, but it'll still be based on a relationship. And so I think it's important, as you're building your business, to look for the things that aren't going to change, because that simplifies how you build your business. And so I think that's really important. On the technology side, we'd love to work with folks who are listening, but you don't need to work with us necessarily. I will tell you, I started a podcast in 2012, my first one. We did 50 episodes and then it died, which is a lot further than, frankly, most podcasts make. I think most of them make it about 6 episodes and then they go away. The reason that they stop and they fail after those 6 episodes is because the people who are starting them are trying to do it all themselves. And so whether you work with us or you work with somebody else or you hire a team, what I believe very firmly is, if you're going to make this successful for you, for your business, you've got to have a team behind it, so that you as the business owner do the one thing that only you can do, which is show up and be the face of the business and deliver the message and create those relationships. And everything else needs to be done by somebody else, whether that's our team or some other team or a team you hire internally. Get a team, because you'll be successful. And I'm really passionate about that. In terms of how we get people fired up for it, I got to tell you, it's the most fun thing that you'll ever do in marketing and sales. Fridays are my podcast days. We interview for our own podcast. I've got 3 more interviews today for our podcast, plus a solo episode. Usually in the mornings, I do interviews like this on other podcasts, and I connect with so many business people from the comfort of my office. I don't have to drive all over town like I used to have to do when I was doing face-to-face networking. I now connect with people all over the country and all over the world right from here. It's extremely efficient, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. And I have made more business friends and driven more business from those relationships, and had more fun doing it than anything I've ever done in the past. And so if you want to get fired up about it and you want those things, then you ought to look into it.
Great advice. So just jump in and do it. And sometimes I think, in terms of, well, I'm doing these podcast interviews, I probably was going to listen to some podcast episode anyway, or I was going to browse Facebook or read some blog posts anyway. So I might as well get my learning in and also get my name out there and also make that connections and double, triple dip. And I don't know about you, Steve, but sometimes I get so many little ideas, or someone says something and it sparks off another idea for a blog post or something like that. And sometimes it's almost like going to the therapist, right? You can ask questions or just get the words out and have some fun conversations. So I'm in complete agreement with you that everyone needs to be doing this. And what I heard from your answers here was that we need to be looking at those evergreen strategies. We look at what hasn't changed and what has changed, and then we can say, okay, well, the thing that hasn't changed, that skill of doing speaking of some kind, right? Podcasting, webinars, seminars, stuff like that, that might change a little bit, but that skill in itself is something that will always be there. Or picking up that's the sales skills or things like that. So we look at what won't change, and then those are the skills we need to figure out. And then the things that do change, those are just some details to be hashed out, as podcasting turns into whatever it's going to turn into, or webinars turn into whatever they're going to turn into. And what I heard from you also is get a team and get to the point where you do the one thing that only you can do. That way you don't burn out. That way you can keep putting out the articles and podcasts, and that way you can have fun. That way you can have some of these podcast Fridays where you do some interviews, make some connections, do some solo episodes, just get the information out there. Don't get stuck about, well, why isn't this CSS on my site working? Or why isn't this podcast feed validating? Who needs that? It's better to just focus on the thing that makes you uniquely unique. That makes most of the difference. And yeah, in the same way that you said, Steve, like sometimes there are people that you try to contact that you can't even get your foot in the door. You can't even get them to read an email from you, but then you have them on a podcast episode, and now you're promoting them. Now that's your foot in the door, and that's the first step towards building all kinds of relationships. And some might not go anywhere, or some might be this person knows someone who knows someone else, or you join their mastermind or whatever it is. So yeah, definitely a thing that we all need to be doing. And speaking to that, how do people take the next step here? How do people find out about you and your team and your company and your podcast and all those things that you have going on? Where can and where should people go?
Well, Robert, thanks for asking. We've put up a page on our site just for your audience, and we've got some things there that'll help them get started with what we've talked about today. So if they go to unstoppableceo.net and go at the end of that, put /Robert Plank. So unstoppableceo.net /Robert Plank. There they can get a free copy of my book, The Exponential Network Strategy, which actually talks about how we use these interviews and use a podcast to network and generate new business, and kind of goes through in more detail everything we talked about today. And they get a free copy of the ebook and the audiobook there. We've also got a video training that goes through if they'd rather watch video, there's a video training that explains all of this. And if they'd like to, book a call and just talk with me about their specific situation, there's a link on there where they can do that as well.
Awesome. So the place to go is unstoppableceo.net /Robert Plank. And there you can find that Exponential Network Strategy free book. You can check out that video training, and you can book a call with Steve and his team. If you're like me and you're the kind of person where you need to do more networking, but you need somewhat of a rigid structure to make sure it happens, because if you meet people at an event, it might not work out, or you might not be able to get some deals figured out. Or if you already are a really social, networky kind of person, why not pour some gasoline on the fire? If you're already meeting all kinds of people and getting on the phone with all kinds of people and chatting with them, why not double dip? Why not record that conversation and ask them about their business and talk them up? And that way you have a little bit of reciprocity going, right? You're not just one of those people that's meeting them and just want something, because these people out there, these influencers or these business owners, they get people coming across their radar every day, right? They have people always saying, well, give me something, or mail for me, or work with me. But if you stand out and you're different, and you say, instead of me wanting something from you, I just want to make a connection and take that first step, go on that first date, and record an interview together and give you some promotion, some publicity. Isn't that a way better way of going about it? Isn't that more along the lines of those long-term relationships that Steve was talking about at the beginning of our call? So the place to go is unstoppableceo.net /Robert Plank. There's the book, there's the video training, there's the place to book a call. Don't let it be one of those podcast interviews where you hear a URL or a website drop and you say, okay, that's nice. Actually go to that website. Go to unstoppableceo.net/Robert Plank. You made it this far in the interview. Me and Steve both know that you're very interested about getting this podcast networking thing figured out. So the place to go once more is unstoppableceo.net/Robert Plank, and we'll see you there. And any final words to say here, Steve, as we wrap up, shut down here?
Well, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to spread this message. I'm really passionate about helping business owners get their message out, and we believe this is a great way for them to do it. So thanks for the time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Go right now to marketeroftheday.com/iTunes to subscribe to the show, listen to other episodes, and rate and review the show.